As we've discussed in previous videos, the pilots, particularly the flying aces of World War II, scored much of the glory. They were not only brave, but also sharp and often brimming with charisma. Though sometimes the aircraft themselves took all the glory, more even than their pilots and crew. The Memphis Belle is one such aircraft. She's almost a character in herself, a hero of war whose name brought and continues to bring a tingle through the spine of all who hear it. The Belle is an American icon, a celebrity, and her crew are legendary. Though it wasn't all glorious and jolly, it was war at the end of the day, and that not one of her crewmen perished in her can be attributed to nothing short of divine intervention. In this video, we're going into the cockpit of the Memphis Belle, taking a look at what she was and still is, who her crew were and how they survived to become legends, and how the Belle herself survived both the Second World War and her journey after it. So what was the Belle other than a skyborne bastion of hope for the American people? Well, she was a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, the B-17 FBO variant to be specific, of which 2,300 were produced, primarily for use by US AAF and RAF Airmen in the Second World War. These aircraft were quite literally flying fortresses, able to take a whole lot of punishment and dish out even more. Flexible 50 caliber machine guns jutted out from every crucial position of the craft, including the nose, and as bombers, B-17 FBOs rained accurate hell upon targets thousands of feet below. With turbo-supercharged engines, they were able to fly through the realm of Zeus himself, some 30,000 feet or 9,144 meters up, and cut through the air at speeds of up to 325 miles or 523 kilometers per hour. And this was while carrying up to 8,000 pounds or 3,628 kilograms of bombs. Overall, the B-17Fs were the fastest variants and primary heavy bombers in the early days of the strategic bombing campaign, which we'll get to soon. A fortress without men to defend it can only deflect its attackers for so long, and the Belle needed a crew of 10 to operate at maximum capacity. While the crew did change a little throughout the Belle's 25 missions, these were the crew members and their positions after they touched the ground following the Belle's final combat mission in May 1943. Harold Locke was the Belle's top turret gunner/engineer, Cecil Scott was her ball turret gunner, Robert Hanson was her radio operator, James Varinus Washer, the co-pilot, Robert Morgan was her pilot, Charles Leyden was her navigator, John Quinlan was her tail gunner, Casimir Nestal was one of her waist gunners, Vincent Evans was her bombardier, and Clarence Winchell was the other of her waist gunners. In the words of Robert Morgan, the Belle's pilot, "If you want in just one word how we were able to go through the hell of Europe 25 times and get back home, the word is teamwork." While that summarizes how the Belle and her crew survived World War II, it's worth taking a look at a couple of the specific scenarios they flew out of alive. Though to better appreciate those, it helps first to understand the objectives of the campaign in which the Belle and many other B-17s flew. While B-17 saw actions in the Pacific Theater prior, the US AAF sent them to England in July 1942, where they joined the US 8th Air Force. Out of England, the B-17s in the US 8th started bombing Germany and German-occupied France, Belgium and the Netherlands during daylight, a tactic which was discouraged prior to its effectiveness in this period and was again discouraged when the Germans stepped up their game and countered it later in 1943. As per the joint objectives of the US AAF and RAF in the Combined Bomber Offensive, or CBO, the primary objective will be the progressive destruction and dislocation of the German military, industrial, and economic system, and the undermining of morale of the German people to a point where their capacity for armed resistance is fatally weakened. Of these, German aircraft industry targets were of highest priority. While the CBO proves quite effective for the latter half of 1942 and the first half of 1943, it was, again, countered heavily by the Germans in mid to late 1943, with only around 25% of the US 8th Air Force's bomber crewmen making it to 25 missions. The remaining 75% were killed, wounded, or captured. The Belle herself was part of the 91st Bombardment Group, and after jumping between bases in England for a bit, she flew exclusively out of the RAF base in Bassingbourn as part of the 324th Bomb Squadron. Her 25 missions were all strategic bombings over Germany and France, with the exception of one on the 31st of March 1943 over the Netherlands. Between her first combat mission on the 7th of November 1942 over Brest, France, and her last on the 19th of May over Kiel, Germany, she not only obliterated key ground targets, but also claimed 8 confirmed kills against German aircraft in the air. During the Belle's 5th mission on the 20th of December 1942, flown over Romel-sur-Seine, France, she dropped her load on German aircraft hangars and depots, laying waste to around 100 fighters before they could get off the ground and blowing a German mess hall to Hades while the officers inside were eating lunch. On this same mission, the Belle was assaulted by some 25 German fighters who actually managed to make it into the air, and who shot 2 other B-17s out of the sky before her eyes. These fighters peppered the Belle for 2 hours, though being the fortress she was, she shrugged them off. Perhaps her closest call was her 9th mission, flown over Lorient, France on the 23rd of January 1943. Here, she was targeting German submarine pens, and while she was soaring through a cloud of German fighters and flak, she was set in the sights of a Focke-Wulf FW-190, who charged her head-on. The Belle couldn't dive as she was in such a tight formation with her squad, so she instead pulled up, and the oncoming Fokker spat a shell into her tail, blasting off a large chunk of it and wrapping what was left of it in flames. After the wind had swatted the flames out, pilot Robert Morgan somehow flew the Belle for 2 hours all the way back to Bassingbourn and set her down safely. After some 17 more missions, the crewman of the Belle became one of those 25%ers who made it to 25 missions, and the Belle then went on to fly perhaps her most important mission of all. After touching down in the States on the 8th of June 1943, she went on a 31-city war bond tour, doing wonders for American morale and funding the war, and skyrocketing her fame past her maximum ceiling of 37,500 feet. The Belle's crew was also bolstered by the addition of Stuka, her Scottish Terrier mascot, and Morgan more than once dazzled the crowd with daring aerial stunts such as buzzing rooftops and turning the Belle on her side to squeeze between buildings. He could easily have been court-martialed. Like many humans who survived the war, the Belle soon began a slow deterioration, corroding and having her insides literally torn out by scavengers while on display. Unlike humans, however, the aircraft can be restored, and after the National Museum of the United States Air Force finally got the husk that remained of the Memphis Belle into their careful hands, they did an incredible job restoring her to her post-25 mission self. To put how long the Belle was passed on, left to corrode, and then passed on again into perspective, it wasn't until May 2018, after the National Museum had held and restored her for 14 years, that she was unveiled in all her former glory. Also, we mustn't forget that there was a documentary made about the Belle, The Memphis Belle, a story of a flying fortress, which brought her more fame than even her war bond tour when it was released in 1944. Nor can we forget the 1990 Memphis Belle film, a fictionalization of the documentary, and both of these productions helped the National Museum immensely in their restoration efforts. Like Morgan said, it was all about teamwork, and it certainly took teamwork to keep the Memphis Belle in the air during World War II and relatively in one piece after the war as well. Hers is a story more potent even than those of wartime heroes and celebrities, and she will stand as an American icon for as long as America stands. So that's all we have for today's video on the Memphis Belle, and I want to know your thoughts. Does the Belle get too much attention? Are there other B-17s or other aircraft that deserve it more or equally? Let us know in the comments section below. And just before you go guys, make sure you check out the links in the description if you want to join our wider community. We do have our Discord channel where you can chat with other history buffs, and if you want to support the channel more than you already are by watching this video, please do check out the Patreon as well. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.